some stories just stick with you, you know? The one we're untangling today is definitely in that category. The 2006 disappearance of Brian Shaffer. 27 years old, a medical student at Ohio State, everything seemingly pointing towards, well, a bright future, then poof. He vanishes after a night out with friends in Columbus. It's a real head-scratcher,
Yeah,
a puzzle with so many missing pieces, even now, almost 2 decades later.
absolutely. It's one of those cases that, yeah, continues to generate discussion and speculation. For this deep dive, we've pulled together quite a range of sources to try and get a clearer picture. We're looking at news reports from places like Soap Central, People.com, A&E True Crime, and Morton's Solicitors. Also, Brian's Wikipedia entry and some transcripts from Derek Levasseur's YouTube investigations. Each one kind of brings a slightly different angle, different details.
Right. So our goal here is to really dig into the core facts, lay out the timeline of that night, and explore the main theories that have been put forward. We want to extract those key insights that help us and you get a better handle on this enduring mystery. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The night of March 31st, 2006, leading into April 1st.
Okay. The evening began with Brian having dinner with his father, Randy. And it's worth noting here, Randy observed Brian seemed unusually tired, like really exhausted. He'd been studying hard, of course, medical school pressure, and he was also still dealing with the recent death of his mother from cancer. That's a heavy load.
Yeah, definitely. But despite being tired, Brian had plans to meet up with his friend Clint Florence to celebrate the start of spring break.
That's right.
So around 9 p.m., Brian met Clint at the Ugly Tuna Saloon, a bar. And then about an hour later, around 10 p.m., Brian called his girlfriend, Alexis Wagoner. She was actually out of town at the time. He reportedly told her how excited he was about their upcoming trip to Miami and ended the conversation saying he loved her. Despite everything, it sounds like he was looking forward, you know?
That detail about his call with Alexis is, well, it's pretty significant. It often makes that theory of a voluntary disappearance feel less convincing. So after the call, Brian Clint went bar hopping, Arena District, reportedly having just one shot of hard liquor at each place they stopped.
Okay.
They eventually returned to the Ugly Tuna Saloon around 1:15 a.m., and the security cameras at the entrance, they captured them arriving. Later, Clint's friend Meredith Reed joined them inside.
Okay, so they're back at the Ugly Tuna. This is where things get a bit murky, isn't it? Some conflicting accounts start popping up.
Yeah, a little bit.
Inside the bar, there are some reports, of a brief verbal disagreement between Brian and Clint. Not a huge fight, apparently, but words exchanged. Then, around 1:55 a.m., Brian met two women. They were seen talking just outside the entrance before Brian went back into the bar, alone. And this is the last confirmed sighting we have of him, like visually confirmed.
Yeah, and what's particularly striking is how quickly things unfolded after that last sighting. Because around 2 a.m., the bar closed. Standard closing time. Clint and Meredith say they couldn't find Brian inside. They looked around. He wasn't there. They assumed he had just, gone home. So they left the bar, and they reportedly called and texted him from outside. Those phone records, if they were ever fully analyzed or released, could add another piece to the puzzle, potentially confirming that timeline.
Right.
And Brian's brother, Derek, he'd also been invited to join them earlier that night, but couldn't make it. That phone call earlier was the last time Derek ever heard from Brian.
Wow. So, okay, the next day, April 1st, Alexis tried calling Brian straight to voicemail. By April 2nd, still no word. She understandably got very worried and contacted his father, Randy. And what Randy found at Brian's apartment, well, it paints a really telling picture.
Indeed. Randy found Brian's apartment exactly as he had left it. Completely untouched, it seemed. His car was there, his bed was made, his medical textbooks were all in place.
Yeah.
This immediately signaled that something was wrong.
Yeah.
It wasn't the scene of someone who had just decided to take off. It felt...
Yeah. And that discovery basically launched the initial investigation. Police interviewed over 100 people, bar staff, those two women Brian was last seen with, even the band that was playing that night. But incredibly, nobody could offer any useful information about Brian leaving the bar. Not one person remembered seeing him exit.
Yeah, that's one of the core frustrations. The investigation also included lie detector tests. Now, just to clarify, these tests measure physiological responses like heart rate, skin conductivity, stuff like that. They analyze those responses to try and determine if someone is being deceptive.
Right.
Yeah.
Standard procedure sometimes.
Brian's father, Randy, and Meredith Reed, Clint's friend, they both passed their tests. However, Clint Florence reportedly declined to take one, which... raises eyebrows,
Right.
though it's not proof of anything.
Sure.
It's also notable that the two women Brian spoke with outside the bar, they weren't asked to take lie detector tests until 2009. 3 years later.
That seems late.
It does. A detail that some have questioned regarding the timeline of the investigation. Anyway, initial searches of the bar and the immediate area turned up nothing. Absolutely nothing. Investigators started considering various possibilities, from an accident somewhere nearby to foul play. The idea that Brian might have left to grieve privately was also on the table initially, but it quickly seemed unlikely given his plans. The call to Alexis, the state of his apartment, just didn't fit.
Okay, let's really focus on the Ugly Tuna Saloon itself for a moment, because the layout and, well, any potential exits are just absolutely key to this whole puzzle. The security footage, or rather the lack of footage showing Brian leaving, that's a major point of discussion, right?
Absolutely. It's probably the major point. The footage only captures Brian entering the bar earlier, and then that brief conversation outside near closing time. Crucially, there's no footage of him leaving via the main entrance. And that was the only public entrance and exit the cameras covered. Just that one angle.
But there was another way out, a service exit.
Yes, there was a service exit. This led to an elevator that went down to a construction area on the ground floor. Now, this exit was apparently secured with a chain.
Okay.
But some reports suggest there might have been enough space for someone to squeeze through. Police consider this unlikely, partly because they figured Brian was pretty intoxicated.
Right.
But they did acknowledge it wasn't strictly impossible. The construction area itself, though, was described as dark, potentially messy, difficult to navigate safely, especially if you'd been drinking.
Okay, so not an easy way out. And that's not the only potential way out that's been talked about, right? What about the balcony and the trash chute? They sound kind of out there, but they are part of the conversation.
They are, yeah. There was a balcony, but the general thinking is that if Brian had fallen, or, God forbid, jumped, it likely would have been noticed. There was a crowd, noise. Someone probably would have seen something.
Makes sense.
The trash chute is a much darker thought. Yeah. If something bad like foul play happened inside the bar, maybe someone considered using it to try and remove a body unseen. But honestly, many find this highly improbable. You've got lots of people still around at closing time. The logistics of doing that secretly, it seems very unlikely.
Yeah, that would require a major cover-up.
Exactly. And the fact that the scene wasn't immediately secured by law enforcement, that's been a point of criticism. If this theory were true, that delay could have allowed for potential evidence to be removed. But again, it's a big if.
It's just mind-boggling, though. You think about downtown Columbus, even in 2006. Lots of CCTV cameras around, right? Our sources mentioned this. And yet none of them caught Brian leaving the vicinity of the bar. Not just the bar exit, but anywhere nearby. That absence of any secondary footage really deepens the mystery.
It absolutely does. And this lack of any visual record of his departure, well, that's what fuels so many different theories trying to explain what happened. Should we maybe walk through some of the main ones?
Yeah, let's do that. The first one you often hear is the idea of a voluntary disappearance, maybe linked to his mental state.
Right. This theory suggests that Brian was simply overwhelmed. His mother's recent death, the pressures of medical school. Maybe he just decided to walk away, start a new life somewhere else.
But like we mentioned, his friends described him as generally upbeat, outgoing, not showing obvious signs of severe distress that would point to that. Plus, that planned trip to Miami, the talk about possibly proposing to Alexis, it really doesn't fit with someone planning to just vanish, does it? It seems unlikely he'd be making those kinds of plans.
That's a key counterpoint, absolutely. The second main theory revolves around foul play after he somehow left the bar undetected. Police did explore this, the possibility that Brian maybe slipped out that service exit or somehow evaded the main camera and then encountered someone outside. The area around the bar late at night, it was known to have some, crime activity could have made him vulnerable.
And there's that weird detail about the police dogs, right? The scent tracking reportedly stopped near a Wendy's next door.
Yeah, that detail is often cited. It raises the possibility that he might have gotten into a vehicle there.
Which could mean anything, really. Willingly got a ride. Or something more sinister. It just stops the trail cold.
Exactly. It's another frustrating dead end. Then we have the theory of foul play within the bar itself.
Okay, back inside.
This brings us back to the trash chute idea, or some other concealed removal. But as we've discussed, the idea of something sinister happening in a crowded bar, even near closing, and then being covered up, involving potentially multiple people, it seems incredibly difficult to pull off.
Yeah, the logistics seem almost impossible without someone seeing something.
And again, that delay in securing the scene is a factor that critics point to, suggesting potential evidence could have been missed or removed if that unlikely scenario were true.
Okay, what about accidental death? That gets mentioned too.
Yeah, another theory that has been considered, although largely discounted now, accidental death, maybe involving the nearby construction site. The idea of him falling into wet concrete is one that pops up sometimes.
Right.
But people familiar with construction practices have pointed out that concrete sets relatively quickly, and it would be highly unusual for a body to go completely unnoticed in that scenario, especially for days.
Right.
The nearby river, the Ulantangi, has also been mentioned, but its distance from the bar and its characteristics in that area, apparently relatively shallow and slow-moving, make it seem an unlikely explanation, especially without Brian being seen making his way there. It's not right next door.
Okay. And we absolutely can't forget the very strange detail of the phone ping. This happened months later, right?
Yes, months after Brian disappeared. His phone briefly registered on a cell tower, pinged a tower, a significant distance northwest of Columbus, out near Hilliard. And interestingly, this was the same general area where a really...
It's chilling. You know, thinking about this case, it happened in 2006. This was before artificial intelligence really became the kind of tool it is today in investigations. Thinking about the challenges they faced, then sifting through witness statements manually, limited surveillance footage angles. It makes you wonder how modern technologies might approach a mystery like this now.
That's a fascinating point to consider. While AI wasn't available for Brian's case back then, it's increasingly being used in criminal investigations now, especially in cold cases like this one might be considered. The real power of AI lies in its ability to process and analyze just enormous amounts of data. We're talking countless witness interviews, surveillance footage from multiple sources if available, financial records, social media activity. It can potentially identify connections or maybe overlook details or even patterns that human investigators might miss just because of the sheer volume of information involved. It's an augmentation tool.
So in what specific ways is AI being applied in these kinds of investigations today? What can it actually do?
Well, we're seeing things like facial recognition technology being used more effectively now, trying to match unidentified individuals against missing persons databases. That technology has improved hugely. Then there's AI-powered DNA analysis and genetic genealogy, which are, as you know, cracking some very old cases by uncovering familial links.
Right, the genealogy databases.
Exactly. Natural language processing, NLP, that can analyze vast amounts of text like old case files, interview transcripts to identify key terms, inconsistencies, or maybe even sentiment. There's also the use of predictive analytics and behavioral analysis, trying to gain insights into the potential actions of individuals involved. And AI helping to link seemingly unrelated cold cases across different jurisdictions. That's a big one. And of course, AI is playing a growing role in analyzing social media and other online data for potential clues or connections.
It's incredible to think about that kind of analytical power being applied. Now let's turn back to Brian's case specifically. What has happened in the years since he disappeared back in 2006? It's a story that, sadly, includes further heartbreak, hasn't it?
Sadly, yes. Brian's father, Randy Shaffer, who was so dedicated to finding answers, he passed away in 2008. Tragically, he was killed in basically a freak accident when a tree fell on him during a storm.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. He died never knowing what happened to his son, which is just a truly devastating aspect of this whole story.
It really is, and the official understanding of the case, or at least what police have said publicly, has shifted somewhat over the years too, hasn't it?
Yeah, a little. In 2016, which was a decade after Brian vanished, the police acknowledged both possibilities that he could still be alive somewhere, maybe having started a new life, and the possibility that he wasn't. They maintained, though, that there was still no concrete evidence of foul play found, and they considered suicide to be less likely based on the information they had, like that call to Alexis.
Okay.
Then in 2021, in an effort to maybe generate some new leads, they released an age-progressed photo. You know, what Brian might look like now in his 40s.
Does that help?
Unfortunately, no significant new information seems to have come to light as a result of that photo's release. And as of 2024, the latest is that the Columbus Police Department has stated the case is periodically reviewed, as cold cases often are. But there are no new updates to report publicly. It remains open but inactive unless new leads emerge.
So after all this, after digging through the timeline, the location, the theories, we come back to the central, undeniable facts. Brian Shaffer, a young medical student, disappeared without a trace after walking into a bar in 2006. And despite extensive investigations, countless theories floated online and off, there is still no credible, confirmed explanation for how he vanished.
The most perplexing element, the one that just hangs there, remains the complete absence of any clear evidence showing his departure from the Ugly Tuna Saloon that night. That single point, how did he leave unseen, is the enduring core of this very unsettling mystery.
It truly is. So as we conclude this deep dive into the disappearance of Brian Shaffer, here's something to really consider, something for you to think about. Given that incredibly short window of time, maybe just minutes, between the last confirmed sighting of Brian outside the bar and his friends trying to call him right after closing, and couple that with the sheer number of possibilities surrounding how he might have left that bar. Was it a blind spot in the single camera's view? Was it that service exit? Was it something else entirely? What single piece of information, if it were to surface after all these years, do you think would be the most likely key? The piece that could finally illuminate Brian Shaffer's fate? It's a question that continues to linger over this case and may be worth keeping those details in mind as you think about this complex and ultimately very sad puzzle.